Let's get right into it. Today we're talking about The Mandalorian, and even though negativity is extremely uncommon in the Star Wars fandom, I'm gonna be a tad critical of the show. But this isn't a review, fuck off. I typically find it more interesting on this channel to analyze something I enjoy and unpack why it's good rather than tear apart something I don't like and explain why it's shit. Artistically speaking, I've just found it makes for a more enlightening experience to plumb the good for meaning in something rather than milking content out of its shortcomings. It's very important to me that this channel stays pro-art, if that makes sense, because there can be a lot to learn from genuine but flawed works of creativity, even those which ultimately fall short of what the artist might be trying to achieve. So when I say The Mandalorian is bad and I hate it, I want everybody to understand A, this is not the point of the video, just a way of highlighting some issues with the show worth being aware of if you're a fan. B, this is my entirely subjective opinion and there may well be aspects of the show that are brilliant I'm simply overlooking, and C, I'm right. And indeed, there is a lot to like about The Mandalorian. To start with the most obvious, Baby Yoda is fucking adorable, or Grogu, whatever, he's always gonna be Baby Yoda. I wanted one of these little bastards the second I saw it, which is exactly the point. In fact, visually speaking, everything about the show is great. The armor is cool and allows for some really spectacular action sequences, the aliens are diverse and intriguing, and the setting and structure allow for such a story as to really take advantage of the vast and expansive fantasy universe beyond your basic the desert planet, the ice planet, the city planet, what have you. See how I said fantasy there, not science fiction? In this sense, The Mandalorian is the first show or movie I've seen really take advantage of the potential that's always been inherent to Star Wars, this sense of a vast universe filled with infinite possibilities that we all fell in love with the first time we saw Luke Skywalker gazing out at the twin suns on Tatooine. And say what you will about shoving him into the story, I am so here for Boba Fett suiting up like Fat Elvis. A lot of time and work and money obviously went into producing The Mandalorian, which is honestly almost a shame because the areas where the show doesn't work, like, writing and storytelling, unfortunately are flawed in such a way that they do affect a discerning viewer's ability to enjoy the good bits. The writing in a good story is what holds all the other elements together. It's the foundation you build everything else on top of. In The Mandalorian, it almost feels incidental, a conveyance to get the audience from one merchandisable moment or costume to the next. An earnest story with flawed writing can still reward study in the viewer, but the more I examine The Mandalorian, the less earnest, the more cynical, almost calculated it feels, and in all the wrong ways. There's a purpose behind it, sure, an overarching design, but it's not a creative one. If anything, I feel close examination reveals The Mandalorian to be the most expensive, polished, and engrossing commercial I've ever dedicated this much of my time to. After this.
Should've gone to freecreditreport.com. I could've seen this coming at me like an atom bomb.
And make no mistake, that's what we're seeing here, but a commercial for what, you ask? For toys? Yeah, sure. Everyone wants a Baby Yoda, and the whole Boba Fett thing has always been one of the coolest looking motifs in Star Wars. But not just that, and not primarily that. This show was the big draw they needed to keep people subscribed to Disney Plus after everyone's free year ran out and we started questioning whether or not it was worth paying $84 annually to access an archive of films most of us probably bought on home release or pirated if they meant anything to us a long time ago. This is important. I'm really not trying to crap on the show's writers. I'm sure they're doing their best with what they get. The problems with The Mandalorian are very much top-down. I feel like a bunch of marketing people got together in a room, picked out the most merchandisable Star Wars character that nobody was doing anything with, then created a list of bullet points for their writers to structure a story around as best they can. Hence the one-note characters that feel like they're written to conform to a pre-established archetype, the way each episode seems to hit all the same beats, the obligatory villain that dresses like Darth Vader.
Have the Dark Troopers been engaged?
Of course there are Dark Troopers.
The dark saber. Does he have it?
And a dark saber.
Oh my god.
Look, Boba Fett is a character that spawned a fairly substantial cult following based on 6.5 minutes of screen time and 4 lines in the original trilogy, one of which being... You ever notice, by the way, both Jango and Boba Fett die because of jetpack malfunctions? I don't think I'm being controversial when I say the biggest initial draw of this character was mysterious badass looks cool. And okay, fellow prequel babies, the cool thing about Jango Fett was his gear, wasn't it? The way this normal dude could fight Obi-Wan and kill Jedi because of all these crazy gadgets that came out of his armor, flamethrowers and grappling hooks and missile launchers and shit. Which is kind of why I think The Mandalorian is basically Armor the Show, isn't it? The main character is basically a suit of armor, his motivations tend to be centered around metal he uses to upgrade the armor, most of the people he comes into conflict with want to jack him for his armor, like 70% of the show is about the armor.
And all you have to put up in exchange is your shiny Beskar armor.
Where did you get the armor?
Beskar is ours.
I could go on and on about the paper-thin characters, the formulaic way each episode plays out, the middling tier video game writing, but honestly, most of this is so transparent that once you point it out, it's impossible not to see everywhere. How many times in the first season do they do the same fake-out scene of Baby Yoda being shot in the face?
The asset was to be terminated.
Go get the kids.
Go watch any given episode with one question in mind. Does this feel like it's being written for a cinematic story or a video game? Once you see it, you can't stop seeing it. The murder hobo going on quests to upgrade his gear, exploring strange and exotic worlds, fighting bosses, getting loot, fighting mini-bosses that are just bigger versions of their children/henchmen, getting into jams that require doing somebody a favor or resolving some kind of dispute.
The child's gone.
Till he is returned to you safely, we are in your debt.
There are even escort missions. I'm tempted to chalk this up to lazy writing, but I actually think it's very deliberate. You think about the video game aspect, the faceless protagonist, the one-note guest stars that all come from shows or podcasts viewed by a certain demographic, all of this is meant to cultivate a young male audience, and it's an appeal that's made in a very calculated, very crude, and I think very unsubtle way. The methodology of which reveals a distinctly unflattering view that Disney has towards its target audience. An audience that they don't believe is discerning enough to know when they're being pandered to in an almost insultingly formulaic way. You know, what the show reminds me of most, believe it or not, is Twilight, where Meyer's novels and the films sold teenage girls the fantasy of superpowered immortality with a hunky, eternally young boyfriend that adores you to the point of obsession. The Mandalorian sells its young male audience on a deadly but nurturing father figure to protect them, and a faceless badass in a universe of endless adventure for them to project themselves onto. And just like I told people from day fucking one with Twilight, I don't think The Mandalorian is the worst thing in the world. I mean, I've obviously watched it, and while I don't feel particularly inclined to keep up with it now, I'll probably check in from time to time. This show is going to go on for the next 20 years. I mean, there are moments of genuine heart in The Mandalorian, but the overall direction is just so soulless that it cheapens the effect. You're not wrong if you like the show. You're not wrong if you love the show. But from where I'm standing, it doesn't seem like the show, or at least the people determining its creative direction, have a lot of respect for you. Not like I do. Which is why you should subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already, and definitely click the bell so I can form other opinions for you in the future. And you should especially click the links in the description to follow me on Twitter and Twitch and Twatch and whatever else is down there. And if you're feeling particularly generous, you can even support me on Patreon like these beautiful individuals. But I don't charge for short videos like this. Thank you for watching, everyone.